what is the process of writing a book? Like all the way from writing to actually selling it. Is it
Yeah.
easier or harder than you thought? What's something you've learned?
So it was definitely harder than I thought because um, before I sold the book, like I spent a couple of years writing it, working on material for it, just amassing material, like a buffet of material. And that was really fun to write, even though I didn't know where it was going and I didn't know what it was going to be. And there was a little tension around that. I still felt the freedom to just write what I wanted to write. And there was a feeling of prolificness of just cranking stuff out. And I really liked what I was writing. And most authors, especially nonfiction also will tell you to write from an outline and that it will make everything way easier to write from an outline. And I think that that's true, but it's just not the way that I was able to do it. So when it came time to actually whittle it down and figure out what goes into the book and what comes out and what is this and how do you shape it and how do you make it all like kind of work thematically, especially because I'm not famous enough to just turn in a memoir, like a straight chronology of my life.
Mhm.
They had to work thematically in some way that felt um, inspiring or instructional or, gave someone something. Um, that was really hard. That edit was really tough for me, both figuring out the theme, like pulling out a theme to put into a proposal, which was the first part of selling it. So I'd like written, I don't know, 100,000 words, and before I even put together a proposal. And
And what do you just write it in a Google Doc, or do you like? Is it like?
yes,
Does it go
I'm
anywhere?
Yeah. Okay. So I write everything in a Google Doc. I think the publishing industry uses Word. So,
Mm.
but I work on it, which I can't stand. It's terrible. And a Mac hates Word and vice versa. It's just I think a terrible app. But, so yeah, I wrote it, I worked on it in a Google Doc. I had help, like I had a mentor editor named Suzanne Kingsbury who helped me both with the content of the book, like my actual writing and selling it and the proposal. She really knows a lot about the process. And she gave me a couple of sample proposals, one from an author she knew personally who had sold her book, and another one she found Jen Sincero's proposal. You know, Jen Sincero, You Are a
Yeah.
Badass. Her
Mhm.
proposal is somehow available on the web. So I had both of those to go on and modeled mine after those. I really needed, like, those were templates come in really handy, or frameworks, like
Mhm.
just breaking it down into chunks. Okay, here's the intro, like what it's about. Here is the marketing section, like how I'm going to market it.
Mhm.
Here's who my audience is. What do they like? And here are the comps, meaning the comparable books that you use, that your book might be on the shelf next to, and why each one of those is like your book. There's so many different sections of a proposal that I needed to see. And I also needed examples of proposals that were written with a voice, that were not
Mhm.
just dry. And that gave me permission to put my voice in there and make it fun. So
How long is a proposal usually? Like how many
um,
pages?
it can be about like mine was like 50 pages long. It was long because it contained sample chapters. So I think like
Mm-mm.
the actual proposal part of it without sample chapters might have been like, I don't know, 10, 12 pages long.
Mm-mm.
I'm not positive, but I think that's about right. And then I had all these sample chapters and a table of contents, um, and all that kind of stuff. So it ends up being pretty long.
Mm. And do you send that out to like multiple publishers or?
So you don't send, I mean, it's very rare that you would have success sending out your own proposal to publishers. You find an agent
Okay.
first. So my
Okay.
first order of business, like once I wrote the proposal, honed it, edited it, had a couple of people read it and make suggestions. And then I started sending it up. You don't even send it out yet. You send query letters to agents. So just one page or one paragraph email saying, I've written this book, here's who I am, here's the book I've written. I love the books that you do a little research, like what books have they helped bring into the world? What authors do they represent? Love this author, love that author. And here's what my book's about. And I have this, you might say, like, I have this many, if it's nonfiction, I have this many followers on Instagram and this many people on my email list. And they're all dying for a book from me. And I would love for you can I send you my proposal for you to look at? And if they say yes, then you send the proposal.
Got
And
it.
then you wait for an answer from them, whether they're interested in representing you.
Got it.
And then
So
they're the
you
one.
did. So you kind of like wrote and wrote just to get your writing out for
Yeah.
2 years,
Yeah.
and then you decided to do the pitch, like following this format,
Yeah.
and
I would
then
say even longer than 2 years. I mean, I just was like stop and start. I would say maybe 2017 is probably when I started. I would like sit down to write, and I had a writing practice. I'm like, I'm going to be serious about my book now. And I would do that in kind of fits and starts. But I generated a bunch of material. And then 2019 kind of started up again, found Suzanne, Suzanne Kingsbury, who I mentioned before, to help me. She was recommended as someone who could help me shape it into a book. And I worked with her. Somebody else was recommended to me, like another editor, and I sent her some of she had a great website. She like had a great track record. I sent her some of my stuff. And then we set up a meeting on Zoom, and we met. And the first thing she said was, okay, so a couple of tough truths. And I was like, oh boy. She's like, you have to be,
Uh-oh.
either really specific or really funny or have a really strong voice or point of view or be really famous to write the kind of book you want to write. And I was like, so I guess you're
Oh,
saying I'm not
oh.
any of those? And she's like, just looking behind me at my shelf of like what sells. I'm like, let's see, Wild by Cheryl Strayed. That's really like so specific that it's universal. Sloane Crosley, she's really funny, so she's got that. I was like, oh, I guess. And so she told me all the reasons why mine wouldn't sell, and then she's like, so I don't know, what you think for next steps. I'm like, I don't think there are next steps. And then I went to Suzanne, and Suzanne read my just like pile of stuff. And she was like, oh, we can sell this. And that
Mm,
got me writing again. That got me back into a
mm,
groove of really what she was like, I think that you should write about this. Like we talked a lot, and she's like, that's definitely a story that should go in your book. Oh, I want you to write, I want to hear about this time in your life and that. And so then I started writing again, like 2019, and 2020 is when I wrote and finished the proposal and went out to agents. Got an
the
agent.
what
Go ahead.
what do you think was the difference? Like, why? Like, do you agree with the stuff that the first person told you, or like was it that Suzanne kind of like worked with you differently, or like what happened there? What was the
That person, I do agree that it has to
so,
have a really strong voice and point of view, and has to be either really funny or really moving, or you have to be famous. And it should be so specific that it's universal. I agree with all those things, but I didn't agree that mine didn't match up with those, except for the famous part.
mhm,
I felt like there's one thing I feel confident about, and it's that I have a voice. Like my writing has a
mhm,
voice. It has a point of view. I think it's funny. I think I can semi-objectively say that.
mhm,
And I am very into specifics. I think if there's one thing my writing is, it's specific. That's like,
mhm,
I think that is my strength. So she just
So she just
didn't
didn't see it.
she just didn't like my writing. And
Okay.
that's her right. She clearly, it didn't speak to her, and she didn't think it was funny, and she didn't think it was that specific.
No.
So that's her right. I do agree with all those principles, though, of that criteria.
Did you, so from that point on, like if you were to say, like if you take that versus the final book, um what percent progress would you say it was at? Like, did you make a lot of changes since that point,
Yeah.
or was
Yes.
Suzanne able to see, like, okay, it's got mostly all the right stuff, you just need slight
Um,
changes?
yeah, it changed a lot from when I put it together and sold it to when it was actually to the manuscript, because then I was working once it's sold to so the you get an agent, the agent shops it around to publishers, right?
Hmm.
And an acquiring editor is the person you meet with who decides whether or not they want to take it to their team, sell
Hmm.
it to their team, say like, I want a budget for this. This is great. This is something I want to acquire, and get them on board too, right? So I sold it, and the editor who I worked with, as she asked me to send her, she had seen a couple of sample chapters with the proposal, and then she wanted more sample chapters from me, like months down the road. And when I sent her those, um, I thought a couple of sample chapters meant like everything that I liked that I'd worked on.
Hmm.
And I dumped 85,000 words in her lap. I didn't count them. The book itself was supposed to be 75,000 words. So I basically vomited everything I had onto her. And she read it and was like, what is this? She kept referring to it as a manuscript. I'm like, no, it's not the manuscript. It's just the bones. It's just some sample chapters. And she kept saying, like, what she made all these comments on it and said, what are you trying to say here? Where's the point of view? What is the voice? It's all over the map. Wow, now you're really rambling. That was one of her comments. So it turned out it wasn't quite ready for prime time
Hmm.
and needed to be more essay like. Like each of my chapters needed to arc to a meaning rather than being just an episode of my life, because that was turning
Hmm.
into memoir, which is the thing I didn't really have permission to write. So I had a lot of
Yeah,
work
so
to do.
sorry, you said that before about, like, they say you're not famous enough for a memoir.
Right.
That, so what does that mean? Like, y-
It means, okay, so it's like Britney Spears can write or ghostwrite a
whatever she
memoir
wants.
and whatever she wants. And we will read it because it's just juicy insight into a famous person's life, like someone we feel we know, we kind of know, and we just want to know better and we want all the dirt. Um, so hers doesn't have to have extra meaning woven into it. And it doesn't have to be
Like lessons. Yeah.
right lessons. You don't have to be famous to sell a memoir that is about something specific. For instance, a really great one that I read recently was by a woman named Jen Romolini, who's she's been an author before, and she has good literary connections. She was in publishing, and she wrote a memoir called Ambition Monster. And it's a memoir, a very specific memoir of being, of working in publishing in the 90s in New York and being so driven and ambitious that she burned out and,
Hmm.
lost the plot of her life. And so you can sell a memoir that has like a really catchy
Got
hook
it.
to it. But I mean, it's not easy. You have to have a following. Still, they want a following if it's nonfiction. But I didn't really have that. I still didn't know what mine was. So, and it's, if you sell a memoir, it has to, like a novel, a memoir, you have to write the whole thing and turn it in rather than based on proposal. If it's
Hmm.
an essay collection or a kind of covert memoir in essays, that you can
Hmm.
sell on proposal. So you don't have to write the whole thing, and you don't have to know how it ends. You don't have
Okay.
to know necessarily the through line, a memoir about
Got it.
blank. Yeah.
Okay, so from there, so by the time you, I guess, got a publisher,
Mhm.
did you have like, okay, did you know what this book is about? What are the lessons and things like that? Or did you come up with that like as you're working with the publisher?
I had to come up with it kind of as I was working with the publisher because I think the proposal that I sent was more about my audience and what they want, and it was sort of positioning my
Mm,
book against this self-help world of like, Untamed by Glennon Doyle and all these empowerment books and books about being
mm,
your best self. And my take was like, what if Untamed is just the state of your bikini line and
mm,
you're just that's like not good at being your best self and you're actually kind of the worst. So I had sort of a theme there in that and the subtitle that I ended up with, which was on living your best life when you're the effing worst.
mm.
But it was a challenge for me to then work that through the chapters of the stories that I wanted to tell because they didn't necessarily
Okay.
all fit that. And I had to make them fit it. And there was this kind of torture of so badly wanting to include this story and that story and like every story that I'd always dined out on and like wanted to put in my book that didn't necessarily fit the theme. And I would cry
Did you have
about
to
it.
remove a lot of them, or
Yeah, I did. First of all, it was just too long. And second, they didn't make sense for the book's theme. And I kept trying to make them fit it. And it just felt a little shoehorned.
mm,
And I think you've met Terry Trespicio, right?
yeah,
She is the person I found Suzanne through. She's part of this community called Gateless Writing that Suzanne created.
mm,
And Terry's also like fantastic editor and writer and friend. I would cry to her, like, I don't know how to make this story fit. I don't know how to make it all
mm,
fit. And she'd come up with a different metaphor each time. She'd be like, okay, look, you are going on a trip. You're going to pack a suitcase. Are you packing everything you own into that suitcase? Everything that you love? No, you're going to pack what belongs on that trip and what fits in that suitcase. And there will be other trips, and you can pack those other outfits on for other trips. And then another one she came up with was she'd say, "Okay, you're making a movie. You're making a big blockbuster Hollywood movie. Are you going to cast every A-lister in Hollywood in that movie? No, you're gonna cast the ones who make sense for the story, who make sense for the
mhm.
roles that you have in it, and then the others can be in another movie. So I had to,
So
like,
good.
keep hearing one thing after another and be like, "Okay, I don't have to
Those are
fit
the
everything."
you must have already known all of that though, right? As a because like you've been writing for a while, and like the whole concept of kill your darlings and all of that. So
Yeah, but
is this something
and
you just to relearn, or what is it? Yeah.
yes, it was something I had to relearn, and also the kill your darlings thing has always applied more to sentences or paragraphs.
Mm-mm,
But not before this, not to whole stories, because it's the first time I wrote a collection of stories. It's the first
mm-mm,
time I wrote a book. And I had always had it in my mind that this book is going to be about this and it's going to be about that. Like I'm going to tell this story and this story and this story. And I also had in my head, which is just the wrong thing to do, but I had in my head all these different voices of like this friend who said, "Oh, you've got to write a book about growing up in like being in middle school in the 80s in New York and how you used to carry mugging money." And I had in my
mm,
head, like, oh, the book has to be about that and it has to
mm,
please these people. And another friend who's like, "Oh, you have to write the story about, Hebrew school." And
mm,
so I think the people pleaser in me really wanted to speak to each one of those
mm.
voices that were in my head.
It's so funny how I because that keeps happening to me too,
Oh,
where I
really?
I keep relearning the same lessons that I've already learned in the past
Mhm.
in a new setting that I don't
Yeah.
realize that I'm actually making the same like for example, I'm making a lot of the same mistakes I made growing my agency, Night Owl. And I'm like, now that I'm growing Night Owl Nation, which is a completely different type of business,
Yeah.
I relearned the same lessons. I'm like, oh my gosh, of course, like this is the same thing that happened when I was, when I was growing Night Owl.
Right, because you bring your personality to it and
Hmm.
right, and all
Yeah,
the
yeah,
things
yeah,
that you're
yeah. That must,
inclined
yeah.
to do. Like, what's an example of one of those mistakes? I'm curious.
Like for example, I really got my ego really got in the way of Night Owl, of like letting go. Also, okay, here's a good one. So with my employees, a lot of times I have to compromise, even though I know that there's a better way to do it. If they came up with this other way, which I don't think is as good, I still have to compromise. Otherwise, they're gonna be like, "Oh, well, I'll show you," and, like they're gonna try to sabotage the project or something like that if I don't
Yes.
actually give them that control or something like that, right? So sometimes I have to compromise a little bit so that they'll have that ownership. And one of the ways I do that is by really praising their work and things like that, rather than uh, giving critiques or like
Mhm.
criticizing.
Yeah.
With my community, what I've learned is like when I go on these coaching calls or something like that, like I'm like, oh, they want to hear my critique, and they want, like, if I tell them what's wrong with it, blah, 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 they're gonna be fine. But then, like, as time passed by, I started noticing, like, okay, those people are not coming back to the coaching calls or something like that, and I'm like, oh yeah, and then like eventually I found out, okay, I have to go soft. Like even if they did it wrong, I have to encourage them to try again, or keep doing it the wrong way
Yeah.
until, instead of like critiquing, is like, okay, you did this wrong, this could have been like, you know what I mean.
Yes, totally. I love that. That speaks to something that I learned in Gateless, not the idea of like your mistakes repeating themselves, but about criticism, right? So gateless
Yeah, I
writing, the
think that's where
method.
I learned it. You
Ah,
told me
yes.
about it last time, Gateless.
Right, right,
Yeah.
exactly. It's about pointing out where the power is in the writing, and that's like gateless feedback is saying, "Ooh, this word really stood out. I love this part. What a great specific. What a great frame, global frame or reference point." And that makes somebody feel more prolific and more like writing, and it gives them more. It's more inspiring and motivating. Whereas otherwise, but criticism can shut you down.
Mm,
But then when it came to actually editing the book so that it would be way better, like the stuff I've written it all. Now it needs to be rewritten. It needs to be edited. That's where the real critique comes in, or just actual like cross out, and
mm,
this needs
mm,
to be changed, and you need to, and that's where Suzanne, her method changes a bit. There's still She'll still say, this is really good writing, you should keep this is amazing, but she'll also say,
mm,
don't need this word. She will never say, like, what are you trying to say, what is this, or or you're rambling. She might say, what are you trying to say here? Really genuinely wanting to know. But often, like, she helped me groom it, meaning like take out, like excise all these extra words that I didn't realize were extra until we went through it. Oh, this can be tightened and this can be tightened. And then you don't even have to lose the paragraph. You get so many
mm,
words
mm.
out of it just by doing this. So there are different phases of it, but that phase where people just need to be nurtured to feel
Yeah,
creative and feel confident, that is really important.
yeah. So did you? So you ended up removing like a lot of those stories. Did you ever like use them like in your emails or like your
Yeah, I have used
content?
them. Yes, and some of them came from my email, so I was like, "Oh, I love telling that
Okay.
story. It's gonna go in my book," and then felt really bad that I did. But there, I do always have like, well, I've always got my email. I can tell that story in an email, or it can go in another book, maybe. Um, but now I feel way less attached to, like, with that white knuckle grip. to those stories that
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to lose. Now I'm like, oh, it's fine. I don't need to tell that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's not that great a story. It's just something that I was
Yeah.
like attached to.
It sounds like such a great practice just in writing and storytelling, like being able to connect the dot between this story and the point you're trying to make or the lesson that you're trying to teach or something
Yes.
like that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm like, I think it served the book, it served the writing that I wasn't famous enough to just write my life story. This happened, then that happened,
Mm-hmm.
then that happened, then that happened, and it was really bad, and then it got better. Um, it's like the fact that I had to come to some sort of conclusion or create an arc to meaning in every single chapter, like in every story. That made it so much better and way more satisfying for a reader who doesn't know me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, so the first version you were kind of writing for your audience, whereas in like the edited
Yeah.
version is more for like a wider audience and for anyone,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like the first version might have been fun for a friend to read. Would definitely
Mm-hmm.
be fun for a friend to read. Ooh, I didn't know this. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Wait, who are you talking about here? You changed the name. That's really fun for them. It's just like reading my journal. Um, but for somebody who doesn't know me, like who cares? Yeah, it has to be a good story that has some kind of takeaway or a real a build for something like that.
What was like? What did you learn throughout the process about like just pitching and what are they looking for? Um, what was the thing that sold? Uh, sold it? Did you and did you talk to like multiple publishers?
Well, the agent shopped it to multiple publishers, but in the end, only one really wanted it. And that's because I think a lot of it is because when I signed with this agent, I had had a friend a who had been working on an essay collection
Mm,
and sold it. And then the publisher, after she sold it, there was a bait and switch that happened. That publisher was like, love it, love it, love it. And then as soon as she sold it, they're like, that's not what your book is. Your book is going to be based on this
mm,
trust that you gave. And this is going to be the title of it. And it's going to be instructional. And they made it into a like instructional business self-help book where that was not what she set out to do at all. And so I didn't want that to happen to mine. I didn't want to write a business book. I didn't want to write a
mm,
marketing book. I didn't want to write I didn't
mm,
want any bullet points at the end of each chapter, any spoon-fed takeaways. No, your next steps. Did not want that. So I made the
okay.
agent promise me that you will not let an editor who buys this change it on me and ask for something different.
Is that?
And yeah,
Do you think the publishers do that like because they know they can market that, or is that
yes,
like more
because
marketable? Okay.
they want it to fit your audience, which is reasonable. Like, I
Yeah.
think so most publishers who looked at my proposal and then looked at my audience said, would she be willing to make it a book about copywriting or
Yeah.
a book about marketing or a self-help book? And my
Yeah.
agent had to say no, she would not. And so
And can I
that
ask
narrowed
you?
it down. Mhm.
Yeah. So it sounds like that's like a decision that you made early on. Um,
Yeah.
can I ask you how you came to that decision?
Yeah, because I wanted to write a book that I would want to read. And I cannot get through a business book for the life of me. I can't get through prescriptive, just prescriptive nonfiction. And I didn't want to write that either. And so,
You
like,
don't
the
like
whole
those kind of
reason,
books. Yeah.
no, they're not fun for me to read. I can't, like,
Yeah.
I fall asleep every time I start reading it. I can't get through
Yeah.
it. I like
Me too.
narratives, right? I like,
And they
I
all
look,
sound like they all
oh,
seem like copy of each other.
yes, totally. And even the ones that are great, like super well written, and by really interesting people, like Seth Godin's books. I can't read those either. And I can't
Mm,
listen to them. I like listening to him on a podcast. Like that's my favorite thing.
mhm.
Interviews with him, conversations, but I
Oh,
can't
I see what you mean.
listen to
Yeah.
those books and I can't read them. And I like a story. I want a narrative. And that's the only thing that I can consume. And so it's the whole reason for me to write a book was to write the kind of book I wanted to write, was to write
Mm-mm.
stories, to write about my like the
Do
stuff
you
that I
think
love to tell.
the instructional books that do they usually sell better? Like in general?
I think that they are way easier to sell, first of all, to a publisher
I mean
if
to the
that's what
end
you
user.
do. To the end user, I think there's a big market for those. There's also a big market for memoir, but like an essay collection is harder to sell unless or memoir unless people know your name or you just have really a great title and great marketing and it
Mm,
takes off. And so, yeah, I think it is an easier sell with like one or the other. Prescriptive instructional nonfiction or a novel.
yeah,
And that middle category of like narrative nonfiction, like life stories, is harder to
yeah.
market
Yeah, I
generally.
noticed that like when I see my clients do book launches, like somebody like Jay Shetty, right? So
Hmm.
he has a very deliberate launch. He
Yeah.
knows he wants to sell how many copies by this date from the launch, and then they make sure to do the media in a certain way to do that and things like that, and to hit those slots and things like that. But then if you look at like Mel Robbins' first book, 5 Second Rule, it didn't take
Yeah.
off in the beginning at all.
Oh, is that
But
right?
it
I
just
didn't know that.
yeah, it didn't even make any of the lists. Like it just threw, but over a long period of time, like through word of mouth, it ended up becoming like like a
Yeah.
worldwide
Huge.
bestseller. Yeah.
Right.
So I think there's like two very distinctive way like how a book can spread. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes. Totally. And those books with like is the 4 hour work week or with a great
Yeah,
hook.
yeah,
5 second rule is a good
yeah.
hook. Um, I think those can take off because people love the concept. And I didn't know that Mills didn't sell well for a while. Like that, it took a while to take off. I know that
She
Jensen
wasn't like
Sherrill's
huge when
book,
the book first came out,
right,
right? It,
right,
it wasn't.
and
Yeah.
that made her huge. You Are a Badass by Jensen Sherrill, I think took 3 years before it took off
Mm-mm.
and was a bestseller. Like I don't know who, someone I guess discovered it, and
Do you think the title, like the 4 Hour Work Week? I know that Tim Ferriss tested that title before he actually published the book, so maybe
yeah,
so he kind of had like some sort of formula. But I also think that the book, "The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck,"
yeah,
like that's such a great title. And do you think that titles alone has that ability to sell books?
yeah. When you have a hook like that, I
Yeah.
absolutely do. I think that that can really make a big difference. And yeah, at 100%, you need you have a great title that's got a way better chance of selling.
Mm-mm. Titles definitely does sell the book. Did you come up
Yes.
with your title like pretty early in the process, or was it something that?
Yeah, I think I came up with I think it was like 2019, not the subtitle. I didn't know what the subtitle was going to be, but um, like originally the feel of it, I mean, this ended up being true of the book, but what I was writing about was really like growing up, like coming of age in New York in the 80s and like gritty, dirty, porn filled New York and wearing, roller skating and wearing a terry cloth tube top and an expression that we used back then was tough titties. And
Mm,
I was like, I think I've said it. I found myself saying it. I was like, oh my God, that's my title. It just spoke to like everything the book was about and the setting and the time and all of that. So as soon as I told a few people about that and they were like, "Ugh, yes, I knew
mm,
I had a winner. And I say the title was both a blessing and a curse because,
Mm-mm.
a blessing because it's a great hook. People see it. I have a tote bag, a Tough Titties tote bag. People are like, Tough Titties, I love your tote bag. Where'd you get it? And then I can say, my book. And then they want to get it. And some people agreed to blurb the book. Kelly Ripa heard the title and was like, "That's a great title. How can I help?" And she agreed to blurb it, and so it's catchy. But and I think that the titles helped sell the book for sure. On the other
Mm-mm.
hand, as you know, that title got banned. You helped me create a video for Times Square. I was supposed to have a billboard in Times Square. Friends were gifting it to me, and you helped me create a video for it. And it was rejected by the Times Square Billboard Committee because of store titties. And
Yeah.
then you even created a version with it blurred and one with an asterisk, and they rejected them both. They said no. And meanwhile, you have people walking around Times Square with actual bare titties, like just pasties on. You can yeah, and the naked cowboy with his tidy whities and his package in practical full view. Yeah, couldn't say tough
I didn't
titties. And
even
yeah, what?
I didn't even know that titties was like a profanity. Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, it's ridiculous that it is. You would think not, but yep. And it Amazon rejected like the publisher's marketing plan that when they bought the book that was in the contract that they were going to run ads on Amazon, and the ads were rejected. Amazon
Mm.
would not run ads with the word titties. So
So,
yeah,
can you kind of talk about the whole process of actually selling the book to the public and like things like that?
yeah.
Where, like, you know, did it take off like right away? Is it like a slow growth kind of thing?
So I really went about this like a true marketer. I made it a real launch. And as planned and promised, I leveraged my email list. So I emailed about it, not just when it was coming out, but long before that. I would email about the process. I would write about, I was talking about it for so long about writing the book, about selling the book. I got a book deal, so many announcements and so much getting my audience invested in it so that when it came time to actually market the book, like pre-orders are hugely important to the sales of a book and
Hmm.
to getting on lists or getting like that. Your first week sales is an accumulation of not just what you sold in the first week, but everything that came before it. So
Yeah.
pre-sales are huge. Pre-orders are huge for a book success. And I had a whole plan. I had a launch sequence for the book to my own audience. I also went to, all my friends, all my colleagues who had email lists and asked if they would mail about it. And I had a whole PDF, like a sharing guide that I created with images that
Yeah,
they
I
could
was one of them.
use.
So
Oh, right. You were one of
I got
them.
all
That's
of it.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know all that. So I give you swipe copy,
Yeah.
like a whole kit and obviously I was like, feel free to say anything you want, but here's swipe. People love swipe, so they don't
Yeah.
have to make something up. And so I had people like you with powerful lists mail for me or mention it on podcasts or have me on their podcast. So I had spreadsheets, which I'm terrible at. Like they were so disorganized and I had so many repeating things, but I had a spreadsheet of like influential friends who promised they would help and how they would help. And like, would I be on their podcast? Would they email for me?
Mhm.
Had I emailed them, I had the column for that. So I rallied everybody I could to help me promote this thing in advance and also the week it was coming out. And then after that as well, I continued to go on podcasts and podcasts are huge for a book because,
Yeah.
right, because as you know, podcast listeners are engaged people and tend to be readers and book buyers. So even though there's no link to click on, it's probably the most powerful medium to promote a book.
Yeah, I don't know why more people don't promote through podcasts, because like you said, like people who listen to podcasts, they're they're not like because like on Instagram and things like that, those are like quick attention span things like that, so they're not like really bought in
Hmm.
yet, right? But people on podcasts, emails, the things that you don't
Right.
see, right? Like unlike social media followers, like the things you don't see behind the closed doors, like email lists, and that's like actually where the real money is.
Yes, totally. That I mean, that and podcasts. I think Instagram shout outs are great. Like if
Mhm.
you have influential people whose audiences are book buyers and looking for their opinions on books, then it's great to have those
Oh, that's
people
true.
shout out your book. And if, especially if it's on their grid, like the ones
Mm,
who just post a story, like that's nice. But
yeah,
when it's on their grid and people look through it and are like, oh, this book was recommended a while back and end up buying
yeah.
it, that is great. But I think more authors probably don't go on podcasts because most authors, like especially fiction authors and people who are not in the marketing online world like we are, don't have a lot of friends with podcasts and they're not used to already
Mm-mm-mm.
going on podcasts. And so they don't have
Mm.
that network available to them. And you probably get pitched all the time from authors
Yeah,
you don't
podcast is
know.
a little bit different in the sense that it's not like a traditional PR where they like you just go
Right.
on the Today Show and like you
Yeah.
just have hire a PR agent. Like you can't really get into the 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 biggest podcasts that way. You actually have to kind of have a relationship. That person kind of has to know about you, and yeah,
Right. I'm sure because you probably get tons of pitches, right? From PR agencies saying like, "Will you have
yeah,
this
yeah,
author on?" Or authors themselves are like, "Here's my book," and you
yeah. I
if
reject
I'm
like
you, yeah, I
99%
would
of them
too,
because I don't know
and
them.
right, because you don't know them, and I mean, one reason I don't have a podcast and haven't wanted to is because I'm like, "Ugh, I can't I'm a slow reader, I don't wanna read people's books, I don't wanna read the books that of the people who are gonna wanna like, the kind of books that people are gonna wanna plug on a podcast that I have." I'll read novels, but as we talked about it, like I don't want to read it. I don't want to ask questions about it.
Yeah,
And it's a drag unless that person is my friend
yeah,
and I'm
yeah.
excited to read
Almost
their book.
every guest that I've had, I reached out to them,
Right.
like because I want because there has to be something I can talk about for an hour, right? So it's like I don't want I have nothing to talk about with somebody I have no idea about for an hour, you know.
Exactly. Well, and the podcasts that I've been on that are the best are with um are with hosts like you who asked me to be on or people who
Mm-hmm.
maybe some of them I didn't know but they reached out and said I love your book so much I want to talk to you about it. The ones who invited me are the best interviews and the ones that I pitched to who didn't necessarily know me and I had to just give sample
Yeah,
questions to or whatever, those are rarely anywhere
yeah.
near as good. I had one interview with this was something set up by a PR agency that I hired for a bit. Uh, sh it was a Real Housewife who has a
Mm-hmm.
podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and she said that, like, she was late to it. I'm sitting there, like, alone on the Zoom or whatever, and then she finally comes into the room, sits down, and picks up a piece of paper, and she's like, "Okay, we have Laura Bredley. That is that it? Oh, I think close enough." She's like, and talking about her book, funny, Tough Titties. What's that about? And it was just and then I ended up interviewing her because she had nothing to ask me. Like, zilch. I
Mm-hmm.
was just
Yeah.
interviewing her because I had done my research and like listened to her a few of her podcast episodes.
So
It
you
was a
have to come up with the
disaster.
content. Yeah.
Totally. Totally. And
Yeah,
I ended
I've
up
had that
asking her
experience
about her
too.
life. Yeah.
It's like they ask me such like a question that's completely irrelevant to what I do, or like like questions that, or just canned questions that is like meaningless. It's just not a
Right.
good conversation.
No, it's torture and the worst thing to listen to. I mean, it's just like,
So
yeah.
It's so. I think it's so great that we're going into these kind of behind the scenes type
Yeah.
of things. I want to ask. I wanted to ask you about like because I know that you said you're doing your shrimp club. This is going to be the last shrimp club you do. Did I hear that right?
Yes.
And so, can I ask you about that? Why did you
Sure.
decide that? And I also want to talk about like your transition in like copywriting versus writing, like copywriting versus writing. Like, what's the difference?
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. So first of all, Shrimp Club, which you have been a member of, and so like amazing to have you be a part of. So it's my mastermind slash I call it a life mentoring party, um, group program, and this is going to be its seventh round. So done it several times now, and it's always great. But I don't know if you ever feel like this, where you feel yourself kind of repeating yourself, and I'm aware of if I keep doing this, I'm going to be just going through the motions. And even though it works great, and people get so much out of it, like people transform, and I love them, and I love it when we're like, whenever I'm on the call, on the Zoom calls, and when we have a retreat, um, I I'm like just wary of getting stale, and I feel like I've been doing the same thing in my business for several years now. And it's felt like I think I don't know what's coming next. I don't have a new thing to replace it with. It's also a big chunk of my income. So that's a little scary, but I felt like I don't want to be repeating myself and
hmm,
going through the motions. And I also feel like maybe the online environment is changing. The market's changed, and and it could just be also that my list hasn't grown in proportion to number of years I've been doing this, and enough to get that many people, that many great people each time going forward. It gets a little
hmm,
harder each time to get that many people who have it in their budget, um, and want that, and are willing to pay, like put down that kind of money. Um, so I just decided, like, I think it's time to like do one final hurrah, make it
hmm.
a fantastic round, and kind of in the same way a great TV series does, end it on a high
Like
rather
Seinfeld.
than, yeah, like Seinfeld, or like I like think of Breaking Bad. Like, oh no, I want more seasons of Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
But they stopped after 6 seasons. Or The
Yeah.
Sopranos. The Sopranos ended at on a high. And
There's definitely that. Yeah, like there's definitely like you. I mean, I feel it because I'm very available. So I feel that like there is some sort of a tension there when you make yourself not as available. People want more of you,
mhm,
and I
yeah.
also like it's it's so refreshing to hear you. Last week I talked to Adar on my podcast,
Oh
and
yeah.
we talked about the same thing. Like I'm like ugh, like I'm getting to the point where I feel like I'm repeating the same thing, and and people can feel it that the energy is just not the same anymore,
Yeah.
and I feel like I'm repeating myself, and um yeah, so we kind of talked about that last week, so it's funny that you bring that up too.
Interesting. And there is something to the idea that, like, the material that we're teaching, the stuff that we're sharing is worth repeating over and over and over, but we get sick of ourselves. And that's just the fact of it. I mean, there are enough new people coming in all the time who would be new to it and fresh to it and find it life changing, no matter how many times we've repeated it before. But there is something to that, like keeping your own energy up when you're
Hmm.
repeating it over and over. You're just like, oh, I don't want to say this again. Like,
Yeah.
oh gosh, I don't want to do this presentation again. Even though people are so excited by it.
Yeah. So you said that you don't really have like a set plan
No,
on the next thing.
no,
Like
I
what
have.
what's something that you want to do? Is there?
I don't I don't know. Like, sometimes I'd fantasize about 'cause I've gotten to a little bit of a cynical point in the online business world, where I feel like, oh, everything everyone is saying sounds so old and tired and annoying, and
Mm,
people like teaching things that I've heard for so long, and it's just like, oh, I hate it all. I hate the word content sometimes, and
mm.
but um, I've gotten to this point where I fantasize sometimes about like, what if I spent a year or even just a month doing only what I want to do and none of the things that I should do? It might be disastrous. I mean, what stops me is like, oh, how would I make money? Like extra, like
Mm,
I don't feel like promoting myself. I don't feel like um, writing, connecting this to like promoting something in my emails. Maybe I feel like just writing about whatever the fuck I want to write about
mm,
and not even giving it a takeaway or not even like just making it kind of like
mm,
an old school blog or diary or
mm.
and I know the writing would be good. Like, what if I did that? I don't think it would be a big money maker, but it would feel fun creatively. So I fantasize that about that a little bit. Um, in
Was
terms of
your
like, no, go ahead.
was your writing your book a little bit like that, or?
Yes, a lot of it was, especially the first part, like before I was like, now I have to fit this to what an audience wants or what my editor wants
Mm,
from me, which felt a lot more arduous. Um, the when I was first writing and just getting the material down on the page, it was so much fun and so liberating, and it felt like this is the kind of writing I really want to do. Like I
mm,
just
mm,
writing that's not selling anything
mm, mm,
is super fun for me. I also like selling, and it's fun when the money comes in. It's fun when the sale
mm.
happens, but really, I just love writing. I love storytelling
Right.
and entertaining people and making them feel
Do you
seen.
think that's do you think your strength is in that, the creative part, or the selling
Yeah,
part? Because like when you do, when you were promoting your book and doing all of that, like one of the things I was gonna like applaud you on is how you have this like perfect balanced way of like staying very authentic at the same time, like not being shy about selling, and like
yeah,
in a very like um like proud way of like promoting your product. And because so I thought that was just something that just comes naturally to you, and like it's not hard at all. But
yeah. No, I don't find it hard so much as it's more freeing when I don't have to do that. I do like the challenge and the exercise of like, okay, I'm selling my book. There are so many different angles to sell it from, like a story about this. Oh, um, stories about being fired, stories about being in the wrong relationship. There's so many different ways, so many different angles uh, into promoting it, and that is super fun for me. Um, and I think it comes somewhat naturally. Like I think I definitely have a facility for it and I like teaching it and I like doing it and I think it is a fantastic way to make a living. I consider myself super lucky that I'm able to use my writing, my voice to sell, to make money. And it's something that most great writers can't do, except for huge, massive best-selling authors, right? Who sell millions of copies. They're rich,
yeah,
but most writers don't get rich from their writing unless they know how to use it to entertain and sell. So,
that happens in almost, I would actually say from my experience, that happens in every career, every profession. Like I don't know if you heard the story, but like Will Smith and what's his name, um the guy from Bad Boys that Will Smith was on with, Martin
Martin
Lawrence.
Lawrence, yeah,
Yeah. So you know how they started Bad Boys together, and like Martin Lawrence was huge, at one point, like more famous than Will Smith, but now it's kind of
Yeah.
the opposite. And the story that I heard is that like Will Smith is like very very active when it comes to promoting the movies. So
Hmm.
like he'll go to every event and every like and he'll promote the hell out of it. Whereas like Martin Lawrence doesn't like that, so he usually doesn't go.
Right.
And and if you like track their career over 20 years, you can kind of see like how Martin Lawrence's career kind of went down and Will Smith's career
Interesting.
went up.
Yeah.
And it's not by accident. It's
Right.
not because Will Smith is that much more talented than Martin. And I see that everywhere actually. Like the really successful ones, like Dwayne Johnson and like all these people. Like when you look at them, like they are promoting like Ryan Reynolds, like they are the promoting engine is like actually big part of their success, and I think a lot of
Oh
people just
yeah.
don't see that.
Oh yeah. No, but it's they don't notice it, but the people who become famous are the ones that they see.
Yeah,
So, and when I mean, that's the effect of promoting yourself and being consistent and visible and tough of mind. When people see you everywhere, they think you're everywhere, and that just translates to success. They're like, you must be killing it. You're killing it
yeah,
because you're everywhere. And
yeah,
when they perceive you as killing it, that's when you are killing. You
yeah,
start killing it because they want to work with you, or they want to hire you, or
yeah,
they want you to star in their thing. Um,
yeah.
or they want to see
A lot of
more of
people
you.
don't want to do that. They don't want to go on
No,
press tours. They don't want to do interviews.
right, right. And a lot of people in our business, like in the online world, do not want to promote themselves or feel shy about it or don't want to
Mm.
deal with it. And I relate to that because right now that's how I sort of feel. I'm like, I'm
Maybe
also,
if you
yeah.
do stuff for like a year,
Hmm.
you kind of have the itch for it.
Could be. I mean, honestly, like, I think I have to set up some kind of, one thing I've never done is set up a true automation, like an evergreen funnel selling my courses with ads and
Mm-mm.
stuff. And I don't know if that works very well if you're not visible, but it would be nice to have something making me money, if I decided to be a hermit.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could do it. I don't know if I could like force myself, like sit on my hands
Yeah. Do you
and not.
think? Yeah. Do you think there's something as a truly passive income, like unless you buy a piece of real estate or something like
Right.
that? Like, is there really in this world? I don't know if because people talk about passive income all the time, but in this world, I don't know if it's actually. Yes, it's compared to the hours you're working. Maybe the income is higher,
Yeah.
but I don't know if it's truly passive.
I mean, I think it's possible that if you have a great offer and great ads that are set up really well and somehow a
Okay.
funnel that's amazing and profitable, um, that you can just do the ads. Like that the ads can do all the lifting for you and you know, be your machine, your visibility. Um, I think it is possible, but I don't know. I don't know if who's out there and doing that. That I think it could be. There could be
Yeah,
true
that's like
passive
Alex
income.
Hormozzi's whole thing.
Oh,
What he does is he buys businesses
hmm.
and then he looks at their whole like lifetime value of a customer and their whole process, and he just like sets up the process that's gonna like from the ad to
Hmm.
acquisition all the way to like delivery. And once that process is down, like you know exactly how much you need to invest in order to get back, like then you just like dump money into it.
Yeah, right, right. Just dump money into it, and then that money comes back to it times two or
Right.
whatever it is. If you're really good, so
But the thing
that would
is,
be great.
even in that kind of business, from my experience, because it's from the first touch, like the when somebody first hears about your product, whether through an ad or something, through the funnel of, and then to conversion, and then the final is customer service to like even referrals or re I guess rebuy or whatever, like repeat,
Yeah,
right? So like a lot of people don't focus on that the end part, which is actually kind of huge
right.
because from the customer service, because this can like break your business too.
Yeah.
So from the customer service point, like just complete through delivery has to be done, and that all requires human touch. And as long as there's human touch, you need to manage that. There's people that need to be
Right.
so I don't know if even in that sense if it's truly
Yeah.
passive.
Yeah. I don't know. Right. You have to, or unless you're hiring people to do all that stuff for you. It's not something
Yeah,
that
like
I've
an
ever
investor.
set up.
Yeah,
Right. Right. Or just someone, who handles your customer service and is the person out is
yeah, yeah,
they,
yeah. But
right.
then you're basically an investor.
Right.
Like
Right. Then you're an
then
investor.
it's no different than you investing in Apple, like where
Right.
they already
Right.
have all of that set up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Or maybe that's what makes you a true entrepreneur if you set up something that can run without you. Um,
Yeah.
which, it's a very loose term in our world. But so yeah, all that said, it's like I don't I'm not sure what I want to be doing. And I think yeah, I think I might have fried myself a little bit just having like I've spent several years now feeling like I could do this forever. I could like I know that writing is what I'm meant to be doing, and I love writing emails, and I still love writing emails. But some like social media, I've started to find like a little bit of
What do you
a
think is the
grind.
difference there? Like what between writing emails and writing for social media?
Um, well, first of all, there's no jerky algorithm when it comes to emails. So it's so much more gratifying. You send an email and it arrives in people's inboxes in the order in which it was sent, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a chronological, there's no algorithm. It just shows up chronologically, which I think social media used to, right? The timeline was
Yeah.
chronological and you get replies. And if you do, if you write something good, it's going to have an effect. And people will engage with it, will respond to it accordingly. But social media feels a lot more like, throwing darts with a blindfold on now. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel
Do you
less
write on threads?
I do, but I haven't really been using it the way I should and the way you do, like really
Mm.
writing for engagement and as a communication tool and to promote myself. Um, especially like we're talking right now in September and it's the heat of election season, like the build up to
Mm-hmm.
the election season. And unlike you, I happen to be very engrossed in it. And
Okay.
because I know you posted, you're
I'm
like, don't
completely
even bother. Yeah, you're
not
like,
tuned
I'm taking
anymore.
myself out because you wrote one post and never like what? And you're like, never mind. And meanwhile, I'm obsessed with it and engrossed, and that's what I've been totally addicted to threads in that sense, and just kind of like reposting things and commenting on them and
Yeah.
interacting in a way that does not benefit my business at all. It
Oh, I
might
see what you mean.
even
Okay.
be, yeah. So
Because one
it
thing I
could,
noticed about threads is if you write something and people do like
yeah,
it does go get a lot of views. Like the
yes,
algorithm is so in favor of the content creator right now
right,
that it's such a great place to you know just to
yeah.
write and
I
see what
agree.
happens.
I do find, I mean, I love the format of it, which is why I used to like Twitter, because you don't have to think of an image to pair it with. You can just write what you want to write, and that's great. And
Hmm.
that's more my thing. I do find the algorithm a little random. Like one thing that I wrote got 18,000 likes, and other things get like
Yeah,
four. And I
and
see
it's like
things.
it's so random in a sense that one can go viral
Yeah,
and then the post right after like just bombs
right,
and then like it's like so but that's
right.
like I think the modern algorithm like is that it really doesn't matter like how many followers you have or
No,
anything like that.
that's
The
true.
only thing that matters like do people want this or not.
Right, that's true. That is the thing about threads is you don't have to have a huge following to have something go viral, to have a huge to get tons of views, which I do like. But sometimes I see people write things like days after it's happened and already been commented on, whatever, and for some reason their post goes viral. It's like, why does this have 5,000
Yeah, there's a
likes?
difference between popular content and good content.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times the
It can
the
be very
popular content
random.
are usually mediocre content.
Totally. I'm like, really? Why does this have 20,000 likes? This
Yeah.
what thread that says the same thing as somebody else, but they said it better. Like, what?
But I guess maybe that is that kind of, maybe for you that feels more like work, having to like please the algorithm
Yeah.
and do it in a promotional way so that I can get people to my subscriber, and then like just writing to your subscriber is like the fun part.
Yes. And it
And
feels more, writing to my subscribers feels a lot more merit based in that,
mm, mm, mm.
like, when I write something really good, it gets the responses. Or when I write, and that's not the same cause and effect on social media
Mm.
necessarily.
Yeah, yeah. You have to be a lot. I think you have to be a lot more um, intentional on social media. Like, how am I going to hook them, and how I'm going to get them into, like, follow me, and that.
Right. 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 And you have a great format, like great formula. I mean, I think your carousels still do really well, right? On Instagram.
Yeah, when I do
Um,
post them,
when
I'm
you
kind of
when
going
you
through a similar slump like
are
you.
you a little bit of a burnout? Like, right, because you
But
created
that's the
so
thing. Like,
much.
it's. But I also see the numbers. Like, as soon as I stop, like
Hmm.
last time you talked about how like you're not really great at feeding the beast,
Yeah.
and it's so it does feel like that, because as soon as you stop, like, my mailing list starts growing.
Right.
Everything just like pauses, and then, you know what I
Right.
mean. So,
Right. And then you see people and hear people,
uh,
online, wherever, being like, I've done less this year than I ever have and still had my best year in business. Like, I haven't
right.
posted and I was on
How do you
vacation or
feel
on
about that?
sabbatical, and I I'm like, are they lying? Sometimes I think they're lying.
Uh,
Or that there's some kind of fluke.
Most
The
people I
whole
talk to, I think, are lying.
I think they're lying. I see a lot of that.
Because I talk to some of them, and like when I actually go behind the scenes, I'm like, actually, you're doing a lot. Like,
Uh-huh.
you
Right.
know, or like, I rarely see people who are not actively promoting, like doing that type kind of numbers. Like, usually, boop, it just
Yeah.
goes flat lines,
Right.
or
Right. Exactly. I mean, I do think that the sad fact is the more you do, the more you do, and the more you do, the more you make. And it's disheartening, like the truth. But
yeah,
I do think most of the people who say, like, when they stopped and slowed down, that business sped up, I think they're full of shit. I think that
is
that's a
that what
lie.
makes you feel? Because before you said kind of you're kind of over this whole uh, business self-help world, and is that kind of one of the reasons why? And you also talked about a little bit about, like, you think the landscape is changing, right?
Yes.
Like, how do you think it's changing?
Well, I think the landscape is changing, and that it feels more saturated than ever. And I mean, there are always new people coming into the landscape. There are always new people finding, some gateway and
Mhm.
discovering it all, who want to take part in it and buy the courses and everything. But um, I think it could partly be the economy, the cost of living, where people
Mhm.
have less discretionary money and less disposable income that they're willing to just like plunk down. Oh, I want to be
Mhm.
part of that. I want to be part of that, especially when it comes to business courses,
Mhm.
because the effect of things not I think things are not selling as easily now. And the
Mhm.
effect of that is people who want to learn to sell their courses, their products, whatever it is, their online stuff. Um, are less willing to plunk down a huge sum to learn that, because it's not like it's no longer a feeling of like, okay, if I invest this in myself and in my business, I'm going to get such huge returns. And look at
Mhm.
her and look at her and look at him. It happens so fast. I think that's no longer the
Yeah.
case. And people are way more careful and want to know more and are, I feel like they're holding on to their dollars a little bit more.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, I
that
think
affects
it's
it.
maturing the industry
Mhm.
because like the trend that I'm noticing is like ever since COVID, like
Yeah.
it just skyrocketed.
Oh my
And it's
gosh.
like
Yeah.
anybody can make money because like I think at the time everyone was leaving their job. I'm gonna I want to
Yes.
start a business, and like all that stuff started happening, and like everybody became a coach and
Right.
things like that. And then now I feel like we're seeing the crash of that,
Yeah.
where
The
because I see a lot
correction.
of people leaving the industry too. Do you know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah. A lot of people
So
shutting it all down
yeah,
for
so
sure.
so maybe it's like in the process of maturing to a point where like like the people who are going to survive, the people who are doing it right will survive, and it'll
Yeah.
take out
No,
all
I
the
think that that's true. The best are going to come out on top
yeah.
and survive. Um, absolutely. It kind of reminds me of in New York in the 90s. It might not have
Mhm.
just been New York, but when I was here, sushi restaurants were so popular. Any like there was a sushi restaurant on like every block, and there was a line outside every one of them. You had to, no matter where you went for sushi, you had to line up to get in, to get a table. And there was just such a crave. I don't know what it
Mhm.
was. And now it's like sushi restaurants still do well, but only the best
Mhm.
ones. Like you're not going to find a line outside
Mhm.
any of them anymore. You can make a reservation. So I think it is kind of like that.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Yeah, that kind of has to happen with every new trend. Like it was the same thing with the dot-com bubble where
Oh yeah.
everybody wanted to do a startup, like, and then
Right.
now it's kind of like starting to stabilize.
Yes.
Are
Yeah,
you
I think so.
yeah, I to kind of like, you know, at the tail end of this conversation, are you writing another book? Um, or do you have any plans to?
I want to. I haven't figured out what that would be yet, what that would look like. I'm writing an essay right now. I was asked to contribute to this anthology about midlife. And so I'm writing an essay about before you hit record, we were talking about like cosmetic procedures. So I'm writing an essay about that, about going to the dermatologist, adding things on, and aging and beauty and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't know what my next book would look like. Like those stories that I was saying, oh, maybe they can go in the next book. I don't know if they feel like part of a book anymore. They might work their way in, but I think I kind of want to figure out what feels fresh, what I want to write about next. And I do feel like like it was something I had to do. I had to get out of my system like this. I
Mm,
had to write my book. And now I'm not sure what book two would be because that felt like my book. It's like so much of my
mm.
life is in there. So like props to anybody who writes, memoir after memoir, or David Sedaris, who's my hero. Have you read David Sedaris?
No.
You've got to read some like
Okay.
read Me Talk Pretty One Day is one of my all-time
Okay.
favorites. He's probably the author who most made me want to write like that, where I was like, I didn't, essay collections, it sounds so dry and boring. That's what his are. They're humor essays. And he's so funny. And he has written so many books. I- I can't believe how prolific he is. He keeps coming up with new collections to write, and they're observational about life, and they're so good and funny. So I'm like, that is inspiration. I want, I
Mm,
would like to be that somebody with lots of books under my belt, but at the same time, it's like, ooh, that took a lot. Like,
mm,
I don't have the kind of endurance where I'm like, keep going, keep going, keep going. I do. It's like I ran a marathon. What, I have to run another one tomorrow? No. And for us, I'm good.
If you before you talked about like how famous people can just write their memoir, right?
Yeah.
So if you were writing like that, where you didn't, let's say you didn't have to worry about publisher
Hmm.
marketing it and things like that,
Right.
and you were just doing the writing part, do you think that would have still felt like that, like a
No, I think
marathon?
it would feel so much easier. Um, and especially if I didn't have these huge hopes of like, I need it to be a bestseller. Like I really wanted to be a best-selling author, and I really want to get in the hands of lots of people, and I wanted to be proud about the numbers. And
Mm,
um, I had so much, everyone's like, don't have attachment to outcomes. I had so much attachment to outcomes that I kept trying to
mm,
shake off. That made it a lot harder. It just added a lot of like tension to it,
yeah.
and work. So if I were just writing for fun and didn't care at all, and someone was just gonna publish it and promote it for me and said like, everything you write is awesome, just write whatever you want to write and then we'll publish it. Oh yeah,
Do you think
100%.
there are authors like that?
No. I don't think there's. I think i think there are authors who are lucky enough that the publisher who buys their book says, don't worry about it. We're going to do the publicity. Like, we've got it.
Oh,
We've got
okay.
you. We believe in this. I have a few friends, like two that I can think of, who sold their books and were like, do I need to hire a publicist? Maybe one of them was like,
They
oh
don't
no,
have to
that's
worry
too
about the
big.
business side.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And one of them was like, I have no platform. That's too big in advance. She actually didn't want such a big advance. She's like, I'm never going to earn it out. I have no platform. There's no way. I don't know how to promote it. And the publisher was like, don't worry about it. We got you. This is, and they set up the
How
whole
does that
tour.
happen?
I think it has to be something with such a great hook that publishers bid on, where there's an auction, and
Mm,
they're, really high bid, and publisher really, really wants it and knows it's going to be a hit. And
mm.
then they'll put all their resources into it and go to bat for it. And
How
so
often are they right, the publishers?
that's a good question. I don't know. I think that I think that most of the time, this is what I'm going to guess, is that if they bet on a book like that and put all these resources toward promoting it, that it's going to do well. It's
Hmm.
um it's not guaranteed, but it's pretty much in the
Yeah,
cards for that book to do well and pay off and be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
yeah. I noticed that if you just follow the money, like
Hmm.
when you see investors like actually putting their money where their mouth is, like that's where I trust that more than somebody saying how great something is, or
Oh yeah.
you know what I
Right.
mean.
Right, exactly. They're betting on it. You can tell
Hmm.
if they're willing to bet that much on it, then it must be good. Then they must know
Yeah.
they're onto a good thing.
Mm.
So, yeah, I
I
think
guess
that's
with you are kind of also the marketer, and that's also your area of expertise. So it's like you can't really find somebody to do that part because you you are that person.
right. Well, also the publisher, most publicists at publishers don't know know way less than someone
Yeah,
like us who knows how to
I
market
agree.
online. They have no idea, and they're not up to speed. And nobody in publishing is a tough business, and most of them just don't know what they're doing because they can't, because it keeps changing on them,
They're
and
not
they
on
don't
the
know.
ground. Like
No, they're not on the
you are.
ground.
Yeah, you have your boots on the ground. You're actually like talking to your audience and
Right.
doing all of that, and they're not really. I actually noticed that a lot. Like whenever I work with big corporate clients, I'm like, it's so frustrating to work with their like CMOs and
Yeah.
marketing directors and things like that because they don't actually know marketing.
Right. No, they don't. Most of them don't. I mean, it's such a
uh,
it's a full-time job, really. You have to be really in it to know
uh,
what you're
uh.
doing. So,
But
yeah.
I think I really think that with when I read your writing, like there's definitely like a personality to it. There's like that's your form of art, and I think
Yeah.
even like when you write the quotes on Instagram and things like that, like that's where you shine. So I think there's definitely something there. Like even without all the marketing and
Mhm.
business courses and all of that, I think you know there's something very special there. And I was talking to somebody. I don't know if you know James Altucher,
Sure.
but he's yeah. So he's like an AI expert also, and
Oh, of course. Yeah.
we were talking about like how like AI is just so far from being able to write. Like maybe they can do the design part, all this other like
Yeah.
music and all of that, but when it comes to like actual storytelling or writing, they're so far. Just because I think that's the storytelling and writing is like the core art. I think it's like the epitome of an art form
Yes.
because you know what I mean, because it's like words are there's like 200,000 words in the English dictionary, and it's just algorithm cannot figure out how to put those words together to like show an emotion, something like that. Whereas in music
Right.
is kind of mathematical, design is kind of mathematical, but I think when
Yeah.
it comes to words, I just think it just isn't.
Absolutely. It can't capture, it's not good at capturing emotion or evoking it. And it's not, AI is terrible at storytelling in the sense that it doesn't have the specifics to make it original. It's not like it can tell a story in the basic framework of a story. Like there are
Yeah,
patterns to stories, right? There are frameworks. There are like 7 stories in the world or something like that, but it
yeah,
can't add the thing that makes it readable and interesting and compelling, which is the original detail, which is the specifics. That's what
yeah,
makes it pop. That's what gives it some grit.
yeah.
Um,
Even like
and
how you order the words in a sentence or something like that. Like
right,
every time I read something, I can always tell if it's written by an AI or something like that.
you can
And
always tell. There's so many giveaways, and it's so corny. AI is corny as fuck. So,
I've tried like I've had AI try to write something, and then I say, okay, can you make it more conversational? Can you make it like as if like a seventh grader would say it? And I just gave it all these prompts, and at the end of the day, it tried,
right,
but it tried in a way that a computer would do it. Like it's so obvious that it's trying.
exactly, exactly. And there might be a few good sentences in there, or like, oh, there's something I could
Yeah.
use. That one word, I hadn't thought that hadn't occurred to me, but
Yeah.
yeah, it looks way too effort. It looked like it tried. Like, you know,
It
A for
looks
effort
like
or
somebody
B for
that's
effort.
really, yeah, like literate try to write like a 7-year old or something. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it doesn't feel authentic. It
Yeah.
just doesn't. It's, I think AI in that sense is never gonna make it, and I'm glad.
Mhm.
I would, it would be a shame if it could,
Yeah.
because a lot a lot of talented people would be out of a job.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time first. And I really
My pleasure.
like enjoy your words. So,
Thank
like the
you.
way you put your words, that every time I read your writing or talk to you and I hear something, I'm like, oh, there's like a way you put that I haven't like thought of, you know, like in that, you always say things in a way that, oh, I haven't thought of it like that. So
Thank you. You mean I pulled the sun on you? I
yeah,
never thought of it that way?
and it's rare but
I
to
mean,
meet people like that, and you're definitely one of them. So so
thank
I
you.
have no doubt that, and I'm very excited about what your next project is going to be.
Thank
And
you. I will
no matter
keep
what
you
it
up
is,
to
I'm
date.
always a fan and supporter of you. So
Back at
I
you,
will.
son. You're one of the greats. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's always great to talk to you. Um,
Same.
everyone, check out Tough Titties. Check out Laura's
Yes.
website and get on our mailing
Yes.
list if you haven't yet.
Talkingshrimp.com. Come to talkingshrimp.com. You will find my book there, and you'll find all kinds of freebies on storytelling as well. If you want to like just compliment some great work, come
I'm
come
gonna
on
put all
over.
the link
Oh, great.
on the description, so everyone just click on the link and check it out.
Yeah, click it.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
Sauron.
I'll see you all.